So in this module we're going to talk about two topics. One is the planning activities that you would kind of have to do for a typical software package for safety critical system using, for example, ee6083. And then the second portion is we're going to talk about software requirements. And also we're going to talk about those high-level requirements that we talked about. Okay, so again, this kind of deals with chapter 5 and 6 in the textbook. Definitely recommend reading that, required reading material. In addition, I added a couple of excerpts from other references as well, which you can find on Blackboard. Alright, so if you look at the original, the D178C, like anything else, has a original definition of the planning process. And it really says, okay, that the purpose of the software planning process is to define a means of producing software which satisfy the system requirements and provide a level of confidence which is consistent with the airworthiness requirements. In order to making a software product, for example, for an aircraft, and of course this is a software component, it's part of a larger system, so we have to make sure that we satisfy these system requirements as well. Now, so planning is a very good idea. And you can kind of see this if you look at this small little table that comes from this book, Code Complete, Steve McConnell. And of course, this is just gives you an indication, but this tells you a little bit about the relative cost of error solving. On the vertical axis here tells you, okay, the time at which an error is introduced and the time at which it's detected. For example, if it's introduced at the requirements and detected requirements, I call that the reference. No time lost. However, if it's introduced in the requirements lifecycle phase and you define it in the design lifecycle phase, now there is a problem. Because now what you find out is that it will take a little bit more, because now you need to not only fix here, but you also need to fix it back in the requirements. Of course, it's going to be even more costly if you define this particular requirements mistake during the coding process. Even more so in the test, and of course when you find it after you already released the product, it's going to be even more problematic. So what you're seeing is a very good idea to plan in advance, but also to perform verification, and we'll talk about this in modules 8 and 9, of your requirements early on, so you're staying in the low cost, which I call the green region in this particular case. So the planning portion is helping it. This tells you at least what it is you need to do and how you need to do it, by who it must be done, and at what time you're planning to complete it. And the PSEC is, of course, the first document that's introduced there, and it must also the first document that's introduced and be briefed to the certification authorities. Well, these other documents, so the software development plan, the verification plan, the configuration management plan, and the quality assurance plan, are specific plans with respect to the corresponding lifecycle processes: development, verification, configuration management, quality assurance. If you look in D178C, for example, table A1, it will tell you a little bit about these objectives for the planning. You want to define the software development and integral process activities in these plans. And development, remember, was development. Integral processes are the verification, configuration management, quality assurance portion. Of course, you want to also develop the interrelationship between all these processes, their sequencing, and as a result also the transition criteria. You need to define those in your plans. And then, of course, also your environment. What tools are you going to use during these software life cycles? Some additional consideration, we'll talk about this later. An example of this would be deactivate code. And of course, you need to, another objective would be the development standards. Remember, D178C is an assurance standard. Development standards tell you a little bit more how to do these particular processes. So you need to identify some of these standards as well, because then in the end, you need to coordinate these plans, and the plans need to comply with the planning document, with the D178C document. Okay, so basically that's what I said in the previous slide. You need to find some methods and tools that you're going to use. development standards that you're going to use. You need to come up with some coordination. In other words, you're going to develop a piece of software. In other words, write requirements, write code, produce executable code, and then you're going to all at the same time have the integral processes. You're going to verify it by reviews, analyses, and tests. And of course, you're going to perform some configuration management as well as quality assurance. So general planning recommendations in this table comes directly from the textbook. You want to make sure that your plans that you write, cover all the applicable objectives. So you need to first establish, okay, what's my assurance level? Then identify what objectives that I need to meet with my software. And then you're going to just make sure that your plans cover those. And of course, this makes use of one of the supplements for the ee6083, like formal methods or model-based design. Then you must also include any applicable objective from these supplements. Well, these plans must be easy accessible. The people that use them must be able to follow them pretty easy. And in the plans, you need to specify what it is you're going to do, how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, and who's going to do it. Who's going to be in charge of these particular lifecycle processes. And of course, the plans, like any other document, must be under configuration management. Now 5 tells you, okay, that means the plans must be consistent with not just with itself, in other words, the contents within the plans must be consistent, but also the plans must be consistent between the various plans. And the plans must be consistent, but also the transition criteria, of course. Now, typically this means that if you have a company and you have to produce multiple software products, it may be a good idea to make use of planning templates, since you have to do it over and over again. Okay, so certification experts include these guys as early as possible. This way they can give you feedback, they can give you input on these plans, and that will ease your certification process. Of course, management need to buy in on the plans, so if you just go around the management, this is not good, and you need to have an appropriate level of detail.